It was around 2 a.m. when I saw the rest stop. I'd been driving for hours, my eyes heavy, my head pounding from the caffeine I'd been gulping down like water. I'd just passed a few small towns, the kind that always look a little too quiet. The kind where the only sign of life was the dim glow of a gas station or the flickering lights of an old diner. You know the ones. But then there it was, a rest stop that seemed too perfect. The kind of place you never expect to see this late on the highway, like it had just materialized out of nowhere. Well lit, clean, with a wide parking lot and even a few semi-trucks parked in neat rows. It was the kind of place I'd been hoping for, a place where I could stretch my legs, grab some coffee, and maybe try to shake off the exhaustion that had been creeping in. The kind of stop where you know you'll feel safe, like you're at home for a minute. I pulled in without hesitation, the tires of my rig crunching lightly over the gravel as I parked under a flickering streetlight. I killed the engine and stepped out of the cab. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but it was the kind of crisp cold that woke you up, made you feel alive again. I looked around. The place was almost too clean, too bright. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen a rest stop this well kept. The small cafe in the corner had its neon sign glowing proudly, a perfect open sign staring back at me. Even the bathrooms were pristine, the metal doors gleaming under the harsh overhead lights. I figured it was a good time to take a break, so I made my way over to the cafe. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. The place was cozy, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee, and a few people sat quietly at the tables sipping their drinks. The kind of peaceful scene you might see in an old diner, if only the customers didn't look so out of place. They all seemed so still, their eyes locked in an empty stare, too perfect, too silent. "Hey there," I said, trying to shake off the weird feeling that crept over me. A woman behind the counter, early 30s, blonde, dressed in a diner uniform, looked up with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her smile was almost mechanical. "What can I get for you?" she asked. "Just a black coffee, please. It's been a long haul." She nodded, turned around, and started pouring. I couldn't help but notice the stillness of the place. I hadn't heard any conversation, any laughter, nothing but the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft clink of porcelain. It was unsettling. I walked over to one of the empty tables and sat down, my eyes still scanning the place. It didn't feel right. Something about the way everyone sat there, motionless, like they were in a trance. I rubbed my eyes, hoping I was just tired, but the weirdness didn't go away. The woman slid my coffee in front of me, her eyes still vacant. "Here you go," she said in that same flat tone. "Thanks," I replied, trying to keep the conversation going, though I wasn't sure what for. I took a sip of the coffee, and it was hot, rich, and strong, exactly what I needed to keep going. I looked out the window at the empty parking lot. The trucks were parked in rows, but not a single driver was out of their vehicle. Not a single person walked around. Just the cold night and the eerie stillness. I felt a twinge in my gut, a sensation I couldn't quite place. It was like a feeling of dread, of something being terribly wrong. But like anyone who's been on the road too long, I chalked it up to exhaustion, the kind of tired where your brain just starts to play tricks on you. I finished my coffee quickly, then stood up, stretching my legs. That's when I noticed it, the clock on the wall. It was nearly 3 a.m., but something about the way the numbers glowed in the dim light made my stomach drop. The second hand was stuck. It wasn't moving. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, but no matter how I looked at it, the second hand remained frozen, dead in its tracks. My pulse quickened. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Everything all right?" The woman's voice interrupted my thoughts, but it was like she had been standing there for much longer than I realized. I didn't know how to answer that. It felt like the air had thickened, like something was hanging over me. I nodded, though. "Yeah, I guess, just a little tired." She gave a faint smile, the same robotic expression. "It's always like that around here," she said, as if she were reading a script. It doesn't always work right." That only made my stomach churn more. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, something caught my eye. A flicker of movement outside. A figure. A man, walking past the window, his steps slow and deliberate. He was dressed in old clothes, like he'd been on the road for days. His face was hidden by the shadow of his cap. I froze. The strange tension that had been building in the pit of my stomach suddenly flared into full-on panic. I didn't know why, but something told me that this man wasn't just a tired traveler. I didn't know who he was, but I knew I didn't want to meet him. I turned back to the counter, but when I looked at the woman, she wasn't there anymore. The cafe had fallen silent again. The people at the tables, they hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. The place felt deserted despite the fact that I could see the faint shadows of people sitting at the tables. I stepped back, my heart racing now. What was going on? Was this place even real? I shook my head. I'm just tired, I muttered, trying to calm myself down. I'm seeing things. I turned to leave, but as I reached for the door, I glanced at the clock again. The second hand was still stuck, still frozen. Suddenly I had to know what was going on. I pushed open the door and stepped outside. I stepped outside, my breath cutting through the still night air like a sharp knife. The cold stung my skin, a stark reminder that I wasn't getting any younger. It had been a long haul, too long. My eyes had been fighting the exhaustion, but now I was awake enough to notice the strange quiet around me. The rest stop was still, almost too still, like the whole place was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I looked around at the parking lot, the gravel crunching under my boots as I made my way back toward the truck. The neon lights from the cafe above cast strange flickering shadows on the ground, and the streetlights above buzzed faintly, like they were ready to go out at any moment. The trucks parked in neat rows were a comforting sight, their drivers nowhere to be found. But there was something unnerving about how empty the lot was, even at this hour. I climbed into my cab, closing the door behind me with a firm thud. The familiar hum of the engine was a small comfort, but it didn't quiet the growing unease that tightened in my chest. The place felt wrong, like it wasn't supposed to be here. The kind of eerie stillness that sends a shiver down your spine, even when there's no reason for it. I started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot, glancing back once more at the glowing cafe sign. It was hard to shake the feeling of something out of place. The people inside, the strange behavior, the motionless figures, they weren't like anything I'd ever encountered on the road before. As I cruised down the empty highway, the headlights cutting through the darkness, I tried to push the oddities from my mind. It wasn't the first time I'd felt weird about a stop on the road. After all, truckers see a lot of strange things on long hauls. But the more I thought about it, the more that feeling settled in, like something was following me. An hour passed, then two. The road stretched out before me in the eerie quiet of the night. There was no sound, but the low hum of the truck's engine and the occasional flicker of my dashboard lights. The highway was empty, a straight stretch, no turns, no exits, just dark and lonely asphalt, the kind of stretch that makes you feel like you're the only one left on the earth. But then I saw something, a glow in the distance, soft and yellow at the edge of my rearview mirror. I blinked, thinking my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, but no. It was there again, brighter now, the same damned rest stop. I hit the brakes instinctively, the truck lurching forward as I slowed to a stop on the shoulder. My breath quickened, the pulse in my neck picking up. How was this possible? I'd just left that place. It couldn't be here. It couldn't have just followed me. That wasn't how the road worked. That wasn't how the world worked. I glanced back through the rearview mirror again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The same neon lights from the cafe, glowing like they had been there all along. But this time the glow was too strong, too close. I could see it reflecting off the trees now, hear the hum of the lights more clearly. I took a deep breath and rubbed my eyes. I'm just tired, I thought, just seeing things. But no matter how hard I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't shake the cold pit in my stomach. I turned my head, peering out the side window, just in time to see the figure again. The man from earlier? The one standing by the edge of the woods. There he was, just standing there. I didn't know how long he'd been there, but I could feel his eyes on me. That cold, unsettling stare from beneath his cap. The same figure I'd seen standing, still outside the cafe. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I didn't need to. I knew he was watching, And that feeling of being watched, it was more intense now. He wasn't moving, he wasn't walking toward me, but the way he was just standing. It felt like a threat. My heart pounded in my chest, and I did the only thing I could think of. I hit the gas, spinning the wheel and pulling away from the shoulder. I didn't look back, though I knew I had to. I couldn't stop myself from stealing one last glance in the mirror. He was still there. The figure stood motionless at the edge of the lot, staring, watching. I didn't know how to explain it to myself, let alone anyone else, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I was on edge, wound tight, and the whole truck cabin felt small and suffocating as I drove faster, trying to escape the nagging unease that clung to me like fog. I had to pull over. I had to calm down before I lost it completely. I pulled off. The highway at the next available exit. The first thing I noticed was the sheer emptiness of the area. No lights, no buildings, just the endless black road stretching ahead. The gravel shoulder was wide with no signs of civilization for miles. I reached for the satellite phone, my mind still spinning. I needed to talk to someone. Anyone. Dispatch. My wife. Hell, even a fellow trucker. I dialed the number for dispatch, hoping for something normal, something real. It rang 3 times before someone picked up. Dispatch, came the crackling voice on the other end, sounding like they'd been waiting for my call. Hey, it's Mike. I'm on Route 52, just outside of, well, I don't know where I am. But listen, I'm seeing something strange. There's a rest stop, and I swear it just appeared out of nowhere. I left it, pulled away, and now I think it's following me. I heard a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, in a voice that was so calm it sent a chill down my spine, the dispatcher spoke. You didn't stop there, did you? I froze. My mind raced. What do you mean? I just stopped. There was a clean, well-lit rest stop. I grabbed coffee. I was in and out, nothing weird, except the dispatcher cut me off. Mike, listen to me. The rest stop you're talking about burned down in 1972. We've gotten no reports from that area since then. Whatever you saw, it wasn't real. My breath caught in my throat. What are you talking about? I just came from there. I'm telling you, it's real. No, Mike, it's not real. And if you saw it, you need to leave. Get back on the highway and don't look back. I hung up the phone, my hands shaking. I turned the engine back on and threw the truck into gear. I didn't know what the hell was happening, but the dispatcher's words were like ice in my veins. A place that had burned down over 50 years ago. A place that shouldn't exist anymore? Yet I had just been there. I had just walked through it. I could still smell the coffee, feel the heat from the neon lights. But now, with the dispatcher's words echoing in my head, everything seemed different. The road ahead of me, the night, the very world outside, it all felt wrong, like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The truck's headlights illuminated the endless stretch of road ahead, but no matter how fast I drove, the unease stayed with me. I wasn't sure if I was driving away from the rest stop, or if it was driving toward me. And then, just as I began to believe it was all in my head, a strange, chilling realization hit me. I didn't know which way was forward anymore. I couldn't tell how long I'd been driving. It felt like hours, but then again it felt like only minutes. The road stretched on endlessly before me, an unbroken ribbon of black, and my headlights barely cut through the thick, oppressive fog that had rolled in. The hum of the engine was the only thing that kept me company, but it couldn't drown out the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. I glanced at the dashboard clock. 5:37 a.m. It should have been impossible. I'd stopped at the rest stop only, an hour ago, but everything felt warped now, as if time itself had gotten twisted up like a broken record. I had to fight the urge to look in the rearview mirror. I was afraid of seeing it again. The glowing lights, the dark figure standing at the edge of the woods, but no matter how much I told myself not to look, my eyes kept wandering back. The dark, empty highway behind me was like a great, yawning void. There was no sign of the rest stop, no headlights glaring at me from behind. Just the emptiness. I rubbed my temples, trying to clear my mind. I needed to stop this. I needed to get my head straight. There had to be a logical explanation. There had to be. The truck's engine hummed steadily, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what dispatch had said. The rest stop burned down in 1972. How could that be? I'd just been there. I could still feel the warmth of the coffee cup in my hand, the sound of the cafe door opening and closing as I'd walked. In and out! The way the lights flickered, the strange, unblinking eyes of the people there. It all felt real, and yet the dispatcher was insistent. The place didn't exist. I pulled the truck off onto the shoulder. My hands trembled as I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I needed to talk to someone about this. I needed to hear another voice, something grounded in reality. But I wasn't sure who to call. Dispatch was no help. They just told me to leave. But I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. I dialed my wife's number, praying she'd pick up. She usually didn't at this hour, but maybe, just maybe, she'd be awake. The phone rang a few times before it clicked, and her voice came through groggy and a little annoyed. "Mike, what is it? It's early. I don't know what's going on. I need you to listen, okay? Something's happening. I was at this rest stop. It's not real. I don't know what's going on, but I just need to hear your voice." There was a pause, and then she exhaled softly. "Mike, you're tired. Maybe you need to pull over and get some rest. Whatever it is, you've been driving for too long." "No, that's not it." My voice shook. "You don't understand. There was a rest stop and it burned down in 1972. I don't know how it could be there, but it was." I heard her breathing change, and suddenly she was awake. "What? What do you mean it burned down?" "I don't know," I said, my voice low, desperate. "I was just there, the place, the people, everything. It was like it was alive." She was quiet for a moment. "Mike, this sounds crazy, but maybe you should talk to someone. Maybe you need to see a doctor. There's got to be a logical explanation." The pit in my stomach deepened. I knew she was just trying to help, but her words felt distant. A doctor. My thoughts flickered back to the voice from the truck's radio. "Leave now. It's not real." "I don't think it's a doctor I need," I muttered. "What do you mean?" Her voice softened. "Mike, you're scaring me." I had no answer. I just couldn't explain it. I wasn't imagining this. The lights, the people, the eerie silence of the rest stop, it all felt too real. "I'm sorry," I said. "I just needed to hear your voice." "I'll be okay. I'll call you soon." She sighed. "Okay, just be careful. You're not alone. Out there." I hung up before I could say more, and immediately I felt the weight of silence press in on me. The road stretched ahead like it always did, dark, endless, and full of promise. But now it felt longer, like it was stretching further than it should. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel in frustration. Why can't I just get this out of my head? What was it about that damn place that wouldn't leave me alone? The voice on the CB radio echoed again in my mind. It's not real. I had to know what happened there. I needed answers. I couldn't just keep driving, not with that gnawing feeling in my gut. So I made a decision. I was going back. The truck turned around, the tires crunching against the gravel as I backtracked toward the area I had just left. It felt like an eternity before I came up to the exit that led back toward the rest stop. The night seemed to close in around me, the air thick with fog, and I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. But I couldn't turn back now. I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes, to understand what was happening. As I pulled off the highway again and onto the familiar stretch of road, my eyes scanned the horizon. The lights should be ahead, right? I knew the turn. I'd seen it clearly before. I should have passed it by now. But there was nothing, just darkness. I couldn't explain the way my pulse quickened or the cold sweat that beaded on my forehead. The rest stop should have been here. It had to be. I kept driving, trying to push down the creeping panic rising in my chest, and then, as if the fog itself had parted, I saw it. In the distance, the soft, glowing lights, like a lighthouse beckoning me forward. I knew I wasn't imagining it this time. I felt my heart pound in my throat. It was there. The rest stop. The clean, brightly lit cafe, the glowing neon signs. But this time, something was different. The place was too still, too quiet. The lights flickered occasionally, casting strange shadows in the stillness of the night. I drove closer, and that same sense of dread washed over me, the same eerie feeling I'd had before, but now it was stronger, sharper. There was something more wrong about this place than I had realized. Stopped the truck, idling at the edge of the parking lot. There were no other vehicles, no drivers. I climbed out of the cab, my boots hitting the gravel with a soft thud. The cold air cut through me, and I felt the same chill that had settled in my bones before. The door to the cafe creaked open in the wind, and I stepped toward it. The lights inside flickered, casting long shadows across the floor. I took a deep breath, readying myself for whatever was waiting inside. The door creaked open. The sound of it sent a chill down my spine, sharp and grating, like something that didn't belong in the quiet of the night. I stood at the threshold of the cafe, the faint glow from inside casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee, as if the place had been open for hours, yet there was no sign of life. The usual hum of activity, the clinking of cups, the chatter of fellow truckers, nothing. Just silence. An unsettling silence that screamed something was wrong. I stepped inside cautiously, the creaking of the door echoing in the empty space. My eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, and I could see the rows of tables, the counter where the coffee machine sat, still and unused. Everything was too still, too perfect, like a scene frozen in time. There were no workers behind the counter, no customers sitting at tables, not a single sound, just the soft buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead. Moved deeper into the cafe, my boots muffled against the linoleum floor. My heart was pounding, each beat like a drum as I approached the counter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that somehow I was being watched. But no one was here. Or so I thought. A low hum suddenly crackled to life above me, the sound of an old static-filled radio. It seemed to come from nowhere, like a forgotten relic from another time. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing as the crackling grew louder, then faded into a distorted voice. "Why did you come? Back?" I jumped back, my hand instinctively reaching for the door handle, but it was too late. I was trapped inside. The voice on the radio wasn't just static, it was alive, and it knew I was here. "Leave now before it's too late." The voice crackled again, louder this time, as though coming from within the walls. "You're not supposed to be here." I felt a shiver crawl up my spine as my breath hitched. What was happening? What the hell was going on? The voice sounded wrong, too familiar, like something I should have known but couldn't place. I glanced around the cafe, the walls closing in on me. The vintage, peeling wallpaper that clung to the sides of the room seemed to pulse with an eerie life of its own. The flickering lights above added to the sensation of being trapped in a bad dream. I backed away slowly, toward the door, my hands shaking as I reached for the handle again. The place felt like it was pressing in on me from all sides, and I had to get out. The voice on the radio was growing louder, clearer now, repeating the same words over and over. "Leave now. You shouldn't be here." I couldn't leave. My body refused to obey, as if something was holding me in place. It was like I was stuck in a nightmare, unable to move, unable to breathe. The voice grew louder, more insistent, and suddenly I saw it. The shadow. The same figure I'd seen in the woods earlier, the one with the empty eyes and the ragged clothes. It stood just beyond the counter, standing as still as the rest of the cafe, its face hidden in the darkness. Its gaze seemed to pierce through me. "Why didn't you listen?" the figure whispered, its voice blending with the static on the radio. Could feel it now, a dark presence filling the room. The air had become heavier, suffocating. My mind raced. What was this place? What was going on? I knew the rest stop had burned down in 1972. I knew it didn't exist anymore, but here I was, right in front of it, in the middle of it. It was all wrong. The clock on the wall had stopped. The air was stale, thick, like time itself had stopped. Inside these walls, the figure took a slow step forward, and the air shifted around me. The faint hum of the radio had turned into an unbearable shrill screech that rattled my bones. I stumbled backward, almost tripping over a chair. The figure stepped closer, its face still hidden in shadow. It didn't matter how much I tried to move, it was as if my body refused to cooperate. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from the figure. Its hollow eyes, its grotesque grin that seemed to stretch wider as it stepped closer. "Why didn't you listen?" The voice, now coming from all directions, echoed in my head, not just in the room. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt like they were suffocating under the weight of the air in the room. I turned to the door again, ready to push it open, but my hands wouldn't move. The cold from the night outside was gone, replaced by a suffocating warmth that pressed against my skin. The voice on the radio was louder now, almost deafening. "Don't you understand?" The figure was closer now, standing just inches away. I could feel its breath on my face. Cold, stale, like death itself. "You should have left when you had the chance." That was it. That was the tipping point. My body finally obeyed. With a strength I didn't know I had, I yanked the door open and stumbled outside into the cold night. I didn't look back, I couldn't. The air outside was a slap of cold against my skin, but it didn't matter. Anything was better than that suffocating room. Anything was better than the figure that had been just moments behind me. I ran back toward the truck, my heart hammering in my chest. The sky above me was an endless black void. The headlights of the truck shone through the misty air, illuminating the empty parking lot behind me. I slammed the truck door behind me, locking it, panting heavily. The engine roared to life with a familiar hum, but there was no comfort in it now. My mind was racing, my heart still pounding. I looked back toward the cafe and I saw it then, just for a brief moment, before I slammed the door shut again. The figure stood in the window, and it was grinning. I couldn't tell how long I sat there, staring at the road ahead, my mind still reeling from the madness of what had just happened. The same static-filled voice continued to whisper in my ears, even though the truck's radio was turned off. It was as if the place was still alive inside me, pulling at my mind. I didn't know how long I could drive, but the road stretched out ahead. The fog was thick, the darkness overwhelming, but I couldn't go back to that rest stop. I couldn't face it again, but as the truck moved down the highway, I caught a glimpse of something in my side mirror. It was the same damned rest stop. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the air, it wasn't the truck. No, it was the sensation that had settled deep in my chest, like a vice squeezing down on my lungs. The rest stop, no, the thing that looked like the rest stop, was still there. It was behind me. It wasn't real, I kept telling myself. It couldn't be real. But when I glanced in my side mirror again, there it was. The lights, the sign, that damn cafe flickering in the mist. It was there, just like it had been before, and I couldn't escape it. The road ahead was endless. The fog clung to the asphalt, swirling in unnatural patterns. It was like the highway itself was conspiring with the place I'd just fled. As I sped down the road, every turn I took led me back to the same spot. I could feel my pulse rising, my hands tightening on the steering wheel, the sweat forming on my brow despite the chill in the truck. I couldn't stop. My thoughts raced, trying to make sense of it. How was this happening? How was it still following me? I glanced back again. Nothing. The rest stop was gone. But was it? I wasn't sure anymore. The more I looked, the more it seemed like the mist itself was alive, trying to reach for me, to pull me back. I slammed my foot on the gas, trying to outrun it, but every time I looked in the rearview mirror, I couldn't help but see it. The rest stop, always there. My hands were shaking, my grip slipping, but I forced myself to focus. The truck's engine roared in protest as I floored it, praying I could outrun whatever was going on. It felt like I was chasing my own tail, like every road I took just brought me closer to the nightmare I just barely escaped. Minutes or hours passed. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. My mind kept racing, looping back to the thing I couldn't understand, the figure in the cafe, the voice on the radio, and those eyes. I couldn't shake the image of those hollow eyes locked onto mine as if they were reading my every thought. It was like that thing, whatever it was, had known me, had always known me. Suddenly the truck began to sputter. The engine gave a loud cough and then died. I froze, my eyes wide with disbelief. The truck coasted to the side of the road, coming to a halt with a screeching jolt. The silence was deafening. The only sound now was the thudding of my heart in my chest. I turned the key in the ignition, but the engine didn't even try to start. The lights on the dashboard blinked in a disorienting, chaotic pattern before shutting off completely. This was it. This was how it ended. I felt the cold sweat trickle down my neck as I sat there in the dark, my mind spiraling out of control. I couldn't get out. I couldn't go forward, and I couldn't go back. The rest stop was everywhere. The nightmare was everywhere. I tried the ignition again, nothing. Then from the silence came a sound, a low hum. At first it was so faint that I almost thought I imagined it. But no, there it was, louder now. A hum that grew, turning into a voice, distorted but unmistakable. "Why won't you listen?" My stomach dropped, the pit of fear growing deeper. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. But I knew. I just knew what was coming. The same thing that had been following me all along. Suddenly, the sound of a truck engine echoed through the mist. Not from behind, but from somewhere in the darkness ahead. And there, cutting through the fog, a pair of headlights shone, bright and unforgiving. I gripped the wheel harder, my knuckles going white as I strained to make sense of what was happening. The headlights grew brighter, closer, until I could make out the shape of the truck. It looked normal enough, just another rig on the highway. But when it got closer, I could see the driver, or rather, what used to be the driver, the figure in... The truck was slumped in the seat, its face obscured by the dim light from the dashboard. I couldn't make out any details, just the silhouette. But something in the air shifted. It wasn't right, it wasn't real. The truck slowed to a crawl and stopped right next to me. My heart skipped a beat as I instinctively leaned closer to the window, trying to get a better look at the figure in the driver's seat. And then I saw it, the face. It was empty. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, featureless skin stretched over a skull. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The figure's head turned slowly toward me, and I felt its presence invade my mind. Its gaze, though it had no eyes, was focused on me, like it knew who I was, what I had seen. And then through the static that had started humming in the background, the voice whispered again, but this time, it wasn't through the radio. "It's too late to run now." The trucker's head tilted slightly, almost curiously, and a distorted grin spread across its face. No, I couldn't move. I couldn't look away. But then, without warning, the figure reached out, its hand a pale, elongated thing, its fingers twisting in unnatural angles. It touched the side of the truck, and immediately the metal of the door began to creak under the pressure. I felt the cold air from outside rush in, carrying with it the unmistakable scent of smoke, burning wood, ash, and something foul that made my stomach churn. The voice came again, but this time it wasn't just one. It was dozens of voices, all at once, overlapping, coming from the truck, the radio, the walls, the ground beneath me. "You never left. We've been waiting for you." I couldn't take it anymore. My breath caught in my throat as panic surged through me, all rational thought slipping away. I slammed my foot on the gas, pushing the pedal down until it hit the floor. The engine roared to life, the headlights blinding as I tore away from the figure. But the road didn't change. The fog remained. The darkness pressed in, and there, ahead of me, the glowing lights of the rest stop shimmered, beckoning me forward. I didn't know how much longer I could keep going. The fog was thicker now, pressing in on all sides. The road ahead seemed endless, the headlights of my truck slicing through the dense mist, illuminating nothing but more fog and shadows. Every so often I glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the same pair of empty, hollow eyes staring back at me, but the road behind me remained empty, at least for now. The voices were still there, whispering, murmuring, overlapping, like a chorus of ghosts taunting me from the very fabric of the air. I tried to block them out, but it was impossible. They seemed to seep into my mind, curling around my thoughts, drowning out everything else. "You're not escaping," they whispered. "We've been waiting for you." The truck's engine hummed steadily beneath me, but the oppressive weight of the atmosphere made it feel like the wheels were stuck in mud, dragging me deeper into some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white, but it felt like I wasn't in control anymore. The road had its own will, its own purpose, and I was just a passenger. Suddenly the lights ahead of me flickered. At first I thought it was a trick of the mist, something I could brush off, but no. It flickered again, more distinctly this time, a familiar flicker. I squinted, the fog thickening around me like a blanket, and then I saw it. The rest stop. There was no mistaking it now, the faded sign, the cracked pavement leading up to it, the eerie glow from the same damn cafe. I slammed on the brakes, the tires squealing in protest as I jerked the truck to a stop. My heart was pounding in my chest, my blood rushing to my ears as I gripped the wheel with white-knuckled desperation. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I knew the place was gone. I knew it had burned down in 1972. I had seen the damn newspaper clippings. I had read the stories, but here it was again, sitting in the same place, the same state, like it had never burned to the ground. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I felt the overwhelming urge to run, to tear the door open, leap out of the truck, and just leave. But some invisible force kept me rooted to the spot. My foot couldn't even move from the brake. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened with the realization. I was stuck. And that's when I heard it, a sound so soft, so faint, that at first I thought it was just the static from the radio, or my own racing heartbeat. But then it came again. "You're still here, aren't you?" The voice. The same voice I'd heard before, the one from the cafe, the one that had followed me from the woods, through the empty parking lot, through the twisted fog that surrounded me now. It was right there, just beyond the truck. I knew it. I could feel it. Feel the presence of something behind me, just beyond the reach of my headlights. I couldn't bring myself to look in the rearview mirror again. I didn't want to see that face, those hollow eyes. But I knew I had. No choice. I twisted my head slowly, the dread building in the pit of my stomach. I could see it then, just out of the corner of my eye, a figure standing at the far end of the parking lot. It was impossibly still, frozen in place, like it had been there for eternity. The figure was cloaked in shadow, its features hidden beneath the blackness, but I could feel its eyes on me. I could feel them piercing me, dragging me into some abyss I wasn't sure I could escape from. Without thinking, I threw the truck in gear and floored the gas pedal, the engine roaring to life as I shot forward, leaving the rest stop behind me. Or so I thought. The fog closed in on me, wrapping itself around the truck like a suffocating shroud, and I could feel my heart pounding in my throat as the road blurred before my eyes. I was driving, but I wasn't going anywhere. It was like the road itself was playing tricks on me, making me believe I was moving while it held me in place, and that's when I saw it again. The rest stop. It was there, just ahead of me. I hadn't gone anywhere. The same lights, the same cafe, the same damn parking lot. I slammed on the brakes, barely managing to stop before I crashed into the sign. The truck lurched to a stop, the tires screeching against the pavement. I stared at the rest stop in disbelief. How could this be happening? I glanced in the rearview mirror again. This time, there was no figure, just the empty darkness of the fog. No movement, no shadows, only the stillness. I was losing my mind. I had to be. Suddenly my headlights flickered, and the truck sputtered to a stop. The engine died. Again. I tried the ignition, my hands trembling as I turned the key over, but it was no use. The truck was dead. The hum of the engine faded, and I was left in complete silence, the stillness of the night pressing down on me like a weight. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure, standing just outside the driver's side window. It wasn't the same figure as before. This one was different. Its face was visible. I felt my breath catch in my throat as I looked into its eyes, hollow, vacant, and staring straight through me. The face was twisted, burned, scarred, beyond recognition. The skin hung in tatters and the figure's mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. I couldn't look away. "Do you remember?" It rasped, its voice a hoarse whisper that sent chills down my spine. "You never left. You were always here." I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my body refused to move. The figure's hand reached out, tapping on the window with cold, stiff fingers. I watched in horror as it slowly, deliberately began to peel away from the side of the truck. The entire world around me seemed to slow down. "You've been waiting," the figure whispered, and its grin widened. I felt the ground beneath me tremble as the sound of crackling flames filled the air. The truck began to shake, the glass of the window vibrating violently, as though it were being pulled into the past. I could hear the faint echo of screams, the crackling of burning wood, the roar of the flames. It was happening again. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. The figure's hollow eyes were locked on me, pulling me in deeper, drowning me in its gaze. And that's when it hit me. The truth. The rest stop wasn't just a place. It wasn't just an old burned-down building. It was a prison, a place where time and space had warped, where the dead refused to leave. And somehow, I was part of it now. The fire, the death, the souls trapped in a never-ending loop, eternally, waiting for someone to come back. It wasn't just the rest stop that was burned down in 1972. It was me, and I had never really left. The truck lurched once more, and I heard the roar of flames rising around me. The figure grinned wider, its mouth opening impossibly wide, revealing nothing but darkness, and then I knew I was trapped forever. Every story's got a starting point. Mine, it began with a map that shouldn't have existed. I'd been driving all night, eyes gritty, brain humming with static. You ever get so tired behind the wheel that the yellow lines on the road start blurring into little dashes of Morse code? That's where I was, somewhere between Kansas and nowhere, halfway through a coffee that tasted like tar and a bag of stale jerky from a gas station I couldn't remember stopping at. That's when I saw it, a glowing diner sign through the fog. Carl's Pit Stop, 24/7. It looked like a postcard from 1963, the kind of place where truckers swap ghost stories and old-timers know the name of every roadkill raccoon from here to Amarillo, so I pulled in. The inside was warm in that lonely but comforting kind of way. Vinyl booths, fluorescent lights with that low hum, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't played a tune since disco died. A woman in her late 60s poured coffee like it was her job, which I guess it was, and greeted me with a simple, "Sit, anywhere." I picked the booth by the window, not that there was anything to see but the skeletal trees outside dancing in the wind. As I stirred creamer into my cup, that's when I noticed it, a map pinned to the corkboard near the register. It was old, yellowed around the edges, laminated like someone really didn't want it falling apart. But what grabbed me wasn't how old it looked, it was how wrong it looked. You ever see something familiar but just off, like a song you know but it's being played backwards? That's what this map felt like. It had roads I'd never seen before, twisting little lines that crisscrossed through places I'd actually driven through a dozen times, roads that didn't belong, roads that dead-ended into rivers or looped back in impossible spirals, and on the bottom right corner in faded marker someone had scrawled, "Only for the curious." Now, I ain't usually the superstitious type, but I am curious, always have been. So after I paid for my meal, left a tip because that waitress poured a mean cup of joe, I wandered over to the map, got real close. That's when I saw it, tucked in between two major highways, one I knew like the back of my hand, was a small, thin road I'd never noticed before. Labeled Ashwood Lane, it was drawn in red ink like someone had added it later, and someone, maybe the same person, had circled the end of it. A little dot, no name, just a red circle, no town, no marker, just there. I turned to the waitress and asked, "Hey, this Ashwood Lane, what's out there?" She stopped pouring coffee mid-pour. Her eyes met mine. Not scared. Not angry, just still. "That map don't show real roads," she said slowly, like each word had to crawl its way out of her mouth. I blinked. "What do you mean, not real?" "It's a joke. Local thing. Been hanging there longer than I've worked here. Some folks say it's cursed. I say it keeps the dumb kids entertained." She went back to her pouring like that was the end of the conversation. But I wasn't done. I snapped a picture of the map with my phone, zoomed in on Ashwood Lane. Something about it itched the inside of my skull. It wasn't just a joke. You could feel it, like when someone's watching you from across a room. But when you turn, nobody's there. I thought maybe I'd drive by, just take a look. No harm in that, right? Man, if only I knew then what I know now. Because that map, that was no joke. It was a door, and I just found the key. That's what Ashwood Lane became for me. I tried to let it go, I really did. But that weird little red road on the map, it started scratching at the back of my brain like a splinter you can't quite dig out. The picture I took stayed in my phone, and every night I found myself staring at it, zooming in, tracing that road with my thumb like it might lead somewhere if I just touched it the right way. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who noticed it. There was this guy, Mitch. Long haul, trucker, built like a mountain with a beard that could smuggle a raccoon. I ran into him a week later at the same diner. I was just sipping my usual burnt coffee, pretending not to stare at the map again, when he sat down across from me like we were old. "Friends, you looking at the map?" he asked. I glanced up. "Maybe." He nodded, like he already knew the answer. "I took Ashwood once. About 3 years ago." I leaned in. "You found it?" He gave this tired little laugh. "Wasn't hard. It's not on any GPS, but if you drive Route 17 long enough and keep your eyes peeled, it's there. Right past the old grain silo between mile markers 81 and 82. Looks like a private drive at first. No sign, just gravel and fog." My stomach dropped. He said it so casually, like he hadn't just confirmed that the impossible was real. "What happened?" I asked. Mitch went quiet for a beat. Then he leaned in too. "You ever drive somewhere and feel like the air got thick? Like every turn of the wheels being watched?" he said. "Ashwood ain't just a road. It's a feeling. The trees grow too close together. The road curves in ways that don't make sense. Like you're looping back, but you're not. And it gets cold middle of July, and I was seeing my own breath." I swallowed hard. "So how long were you on it?" "Couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. But when I turned around to leave, I came out 4 hours later. GPS was dead the whole time. Clock in the dash went haywire. I lost a whole delivery that night. You ever go back?" Mitch looked out the window, jaw tight. "Nope, but I had a buddy, Deeks, ran hauls between Denver and Tulsa. I told him about the road, showed him the map. That's when I knew where this was going. He went looking for it, didn't he?" "Yeah," Mitch said softly. "Real curious guy, thought I was full of crap. Said he found it a few weeks later, and no one's seen him since." He sat back in the booth then, like he'd dropped a weight on the table between us. Just stared into his coffee like the answers were swirling at the bottom of the mug. "He called me before he went in," Mitch said after a while. "Said he saw the red gravel, said the trees didn't look right, said it felt like the air was watching him. That was the last time I heard his voice." "Jesus," I muttered. "Cops said he probably ran off, maybe robbed, maybe rolled his rig into a ditch in some off-grid stretch of desert. But you don't think so?" Mitch shook his head. "You know what I think? I think that road doesn't want to be found, but when you do, it doesn't let you leave. After Mitch left that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the back of my SUV in the diner's parking lot, watching the moon drift behind clouds and feeling like maybe, just maybe, I'd stuck my nose into something I should have left alone. But that map, it was like it knew I was thinking about it. And the next morning, when I stepped back into the diner for a refill, something on the map had changed. The red dot on Ashwood Lane, the one that marked the end, was gone. In its place was a new one, different spot. A new phantom road, one I hadn't seen before, Crane Hollow. Another winding little line snaking through nowhere, ending in another empty red circle. That's when I realized something bone deep and awful. The map updates. It's not just some relic. It's alive, watching, keeping track. And every time someone follows one of those roads, it marks them. Or maybe marks where they disappeared. You ever get that gut feeling that you're not the first one to stumble onto something weird? Yeah, that feeling hit me like a brick to the chest when I realized the map had changed, like it had updated itself. New red line, new road, new mystery. But something about it also felt patterned, like a cycle. Crane Hollow. That was the name of the new one. Never heard of it, never seen it on a map, but it was etched into the fake road spaghetti tangle like it had always been there. And if the last red mark meant someone had vanished, Deeks maybe, then this new one? It meant someone else had just been lured in. Someone else was gone. I couldn't shake it, So I started asking around. You'd be amazed what a guy can dig up in a place like that diner if he plays it cool, tosses a few extra bucks in the tip jar, and listens more than he talks. Turns out, this map? It's a thing. Locals don't like to talk about it much, at least not to outsiders. But once they know you've seen it, once they know you've really seen it, some of them open up, like Gus. Big guy, former long haul, always at the far end, for the counter with his hat pulled low and a permanent scowl on his face. I caught his eye while studying the map again, and he grunted me over like a dog that smelled fear. "You looking at the ghost roads?" he asked, not even glancing up from his cup. "I might be," I said. "You know anything about them?" He gave me this look, somewhere between amusement and pity. "Know 'em? Son, I drove one." I sat down without waiting for an invite. Gus leaned in, his voice low and dry like gravel in a tumbler. "Back in '96, took a wrong turn coming up from El Paso, wound up on this dirt trail that wasn't on my route. Thought I was just tired. Kept going. Every mile I drove, the trees got taller, denser, the light, it got weird, like time was stuck at dusk." "What happened?" I asked. "Saw a girl in the road, pale, dressed down to her ankles. Looked like she was waiting for a bus that wasn't coming." I stopped, rolled down my window to ask if she needed help. He paused. She smiled at me. But it wasn't right. Her mouth kept smiling after the rest of her face stopped. Then she turned and walked off into the woods, just disappeared. I turned that truck around so fast I damn near jackknifed. "And you made it back?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah. But I was gone for 2 days. My dispatcher said I missed my whole delivery window. Lost the job. I hadn't even run out of gas." I sat there in silence, the clink of dishes and hum of the diner suddenly far away. "You ever find that road again?" "Never tried." Gus met my eyes. "Some folks go looking, some get found. I count myself lucky. That was the first of them. Over the next week it was like the floodgates opened. A waitress named Luann said her cousin disappeared in 2008 after stopping through with a buddy. They joked about the map. He dared the other to follow one of the roads. The next day one came back alone, rambling nonsense about roads that looped in circles and the man with no eyes. A guy in a denim vest at the gas pump told me a friend of a friend tried to follow one of the phantom roads on foot. Didn't even make it a mile before he turned around and found the highway gone, just flat prairie. They had to call search and rescue. He was found 3 counties over, dehydrated and raving. Then there was a schoolteacher, retired now, who said back in the 70s there were rumors about kids following the map on a dare. Never came home. Cops wrote it off as runaways, but their bikes were found rusting near a dirt road that no longer exists. These weren't just urban legends. There was a pattern. Every time someone got too close to one of the ghost roads, something changed in the map. A new line, a new name, a new red dot, and every time, someone disappeared. Sometimes they came back. Most didn't. And the ones who did, they were never quite the same. One woman, Clarice, told me her brother had driven into what he thought was just a detour near Winding Creek. Said he came back off, wouldn't talk, wouldn't sleep. Died 2 months later, just dropped. Dead in his sleep, heart failure. He was 32. That night I went back to the diner one more time. No appetite, just coffee and dread. The map was still there, still glowing faintly in that way. Things do when you're too tired and too scared to trust your eyes. And guess what? Another road had appeared. This one snaked out from Crane Hollow like it had grown from it, labeled in faded, almost invisible ink. Dead Lantern Trail. No one else in the diner noticed, just me, like it was waiting for me to see it. And that's when I realized this map doesn't just show where people disappear, it decides who disappears next. It was about 2 a.m. when I finally asked the question out loud. I was alone in the diner, except for the cook in the back and the night waitress, Darla. She'd been there almost every time I showed up, always watching me out of the corner of her eye. She looked tired in that way people look when they've been carrying a secret too long, so I figured, screw it. You know what the map really is, don't you? She didn't answer right away, just kept wiping down the counter like she hadn't heard me, but her jaw went tight. I'm not leaving until you tell me, I said, half a challenge, half a plea. Darla looked up at me then. You should have stopped looking at it. That was all she said. But then she reached into the drawer beneath the register and pulled out a worn envelope, yellowed edges. Smelled like it had been sitting next to an ashtray for a decade. She slid it toward me. I opened it. Inside was a black and white photo. Looked like it had been taken in the 50s. The diner looked the same. Same sign, same booths, same damn map on the wall. Only, it wasn't quite the same. There were fewer roads, and the ones that were there, they were darker, bolder, like they'd just been drawn. And instead of red dots, there were names written in fine cursive ink beside each one. Bobby H. Charlene G. Tommy, age 9. I felt ice in my gut. This photo's real? I asked. Darla nodded. My granddad ran this place back then. Said the map just showed up one day, tacked to the wall like someone left it there on purpose. Someone did, I muttered. That's what he thought too. Thought maybe it was a prank, until Bobby H. went missing that summer, followed a road no one could. Find again, then Charlene, then little Tommy, and the names. Granddad wrote them down, she said. Every time someone vanished after looking at that thing, he thought maybe if he recorded it, it'd stop. It didn't. I looked down at the photo again. Something about the names twisted my stomach. They looked handwritten, but the ink wasn't over the photo, it was in it. Like it had always been part of the image, burned into the paper. Where'd the map come from? I asked. Do you know? Darla hesitated. There's one story. She pulled out an old manila folder, thick with brittle newspaper clippings. She opened it to a yellowed page from some now-defunct local paper. Cartographer found dead in woods, surrounded by maps that led nowhere. It was dated 1938. He lived out past the mountains, she said. Name was Ephraim Bell. Used to work for the state, drawing maps. Good ones, precise. But then something changed, started adding roads that didn't exist. Whole neighborhoods, parks, train tracks that weren't there. Said he was mapping what could be, not what was. I raised an eyebrow. Like imaginary geography? Darla nodded. Except people started going missing, always near places he'd marked. One sheriff said the guy thought he was drawing invitations. That word landed heavy. Invitations. He died in the woods, she went on. They found dozens of maps around him, hand-drawn, and every single one had a road labeled Ashwood Lane. 5 froze. Wait, Ashwood was on his maps too? Yep. I sat back in the booth, my hands numb. So what? He cursed the diner? Cursed the map? No one knows. But the first owner of the diner, my granddad, found one of those maps in his mailbox the day the place opened. Thought it was some welcome to the neighborhood flyer. Tacked it on the wall. Been there ever since. And no one ever took it down? People tried, she said. Would fall back on the floor, or reappear the next day like it never moved, so they gave up. It became part of the place. I looked up at the map on the wall. It didn't seem so harmless now. It looked hungry. I left the diner just before dawn, mind-reeling. That map wasn't just a mystery, it was a collector. It gathered names, roads, souls maybe. It marked the ones who looked too closely. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo I took of the map weeks ago, and my blood went cold. There was a red dot next to a road labeled Darla's Bend. I hadn't seen it before. I looked back at the diner, heart pounding. Was she already marked? Or was I? You ever have a moment where you know you could walk away? That feeling where the universe is giving you a free pass. A quiet little whisper that says, turn around. Forget this. Go back to your normal, boring life. Yeah, I had one of those. But I didn't listen. After Darla showed me the photo, the newspaper clippings, and the legend of Ephraim Bell, I told myself I was done. Really, I meant it. I packed up, filled the tank, and started heading west on I-40. Just going to keep driving till I hit somewhere normal, somewhere that didn't have cursed maps and roads that made people vanish. But 10 miles out, I started to feel it. That pull. It wasn't like a voice. Not quite, more like a thought that wasn't mine, a need. You know that itch on your back you just can't reach? That's what it felt like, but in my mind. A sharp tug towards something I couldn't see. but couldn't ignore either. So I pulled over on the side of the highway, took a deep breath and checked the map photo on my phone. The newest road, Dead Lantern Trail, was pulsing. I don't mean literally glowing, but it felt that way. Like my phone was warmer in my hand when I looked at it, and next to the trail, a dot. No name, just a dot. Waiting. I should have deleted the photo, tossed the phone, driven into the sunrise, and never looked back. But I didn't. Because I needed to know. I needed to see what was at the end of one of those roads. I needed to understand what had taken Deeks and Bobby and little Tommy from the photo. What had almost taken Gus? I needed the truth, even if it swallowed me whole. I turned the car around. The map had mentioned the trail branched off from Crane Hollow. So I drove there first. Back roads, dusty and cracked. I passed an old silo just, like Mitch said, mile marker 82, and there it was, Crane Hollow Road. It looked wrong. The pavement faded to gravel about 100 feet in, swallowed by overgrown trees that leaned in too close, like eavesdroppers listening to something I wasn't meant to say. The air went still the moment my tires hit the path. My radio hissed with static. My GPS went blank. Still I drove. Every nerve in my body screamed that this was stupid, suicidal. But I couldn't stop. Not now, I'd come too far. I needed to see it. Crane Hollow twisted for miles, or maybe it was minutes. I lost sense of time. The sun looked stuck. Shadows didn't fall right. And then, just as the map showed, I hit a fork. The sign was hand-carved. Crooked, barely hanging on one nail. Dead Lantern Trail, keep eyes open. I got out of the car, heart jackhammering in my chest. The trail ahead was narrower than the rest, barely wide enough for my car. There were old lanterns hanging from the trees, rusted, cracked glass, and every single one was unlit, except for the last one. Far in the distance, at the trail's end, one lantern flickered, like it was waiting for me. I stood there for a long time, keys in hand, staring down the path. This was it. The fork in the story. The moment where the narrator either becomes another name on the map or comes back with a story no one believes, and man, I wanted to be the one who came back. So I got in the car, put it in gear, and drove. The trees got thicker, the sky darker. The road turned from gravel to dirt, and then to something else entirely. Soft, spongy, like driving over old moss. The air smelled sweet and sick at the same time. Flowers bloomed out of season. Wind whispered through the branches in voices just below hearing. Then, silence. No birds. No insects. No sound at all except for my tires crunching slowly forward. The lanterns blinked out one by one as I passed them, until only the last one remained. I reached the end of the road. The last lantern burned blue. There was a clearing ahead, circular, and unnatural, like it had been carved into the forest. In the center stood a figure, tall, thin, shadowed, no face, just a vague shape where a person should be. And in its hand, a map. My map. The same map from the diner, except now it was covered. In names, hundreds, maybe thousands, some scratched out. Others fresh and glistening like ink that hadn't dried. My name was one of them, scrawled right next to Dead Lantern Trail. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My mouth wouldn't open. The figure held the map out to me like an offer, or a sentence. And I realized this wasn't about curiosity. It was about legacy. Everyone who sees the map has a choice: follow it, or be haunted by it forever. And once you choose to follow, you never really leave. I took a step forward. Just one. The lantern flared. The figure vanished, and the world went black. Black, total black, like being underwater with your eyes open and no memory of ever surfacing. No sound, no air, no pain even. Just absence. Then, all at once, snap. I was back. At first I thought it was a dream. My hands were still gripping the wheel. The engine was off, the last lantern was gone. The woods were silent, but they weren't suffocating anymore, just woods, normal. I was parked in the middle of the trail, still alive. I blinked a few times just to make sure, then checked the clock. 12 a.m. Last I remembered, It was barely midnight. My phone was dead. Dash clock was flickering like it had shorted. Out. Time had slipped again, like someone had pressed fast forward on the outside while I was stuck inside a paused scene. But that wasn't the weirdest part. No. The weirdest part was the passenger seat. Sitting there, right beside me, was a folded piece of paper, old, yellowed, creased like it had been opened and shut 1,000 times. I didn't put it there. With hands that didn't quite feel like mine, I opened it. It was the map, but different. This time, no longer laminated. No corkboard pinholes, no diner smudge corners. This one felt older, original, hand-drawn in fading ink and red chalk. The roads were still there, Ashwood Lane, Crane Hollow, Dead Lantern Trail, but now there were others. New ones I hadn't seen before. Gallows Turn, Mercy Hollow, Greylight. Spur, and next to each, written in delicate script, my handwriting. I dropped the map like it was burning, and that's when I understood. I hadn't just come back. I'd been changed, marked. The road hadn't swallowed me whole. It had used me, like it was passing something on, like I was the next cartographer in a long line of suckers who couldn't look away. I didn't remember drawing those new roads, but I knew they were mine. I drove back to the diner in a daze. Pulled, in just before dawn, Darla was standing outside, arms crossed, waiting like she already knew. "You went in," she said quietly. I nodded. She looked down at the map in my hands. "It's yours now." I didn't want it. "Doesn't matter. You took the road." I wanted to scream at her, ask how to undo it, how to stop the map from spreading, from claiming more names. But I already knew the answer. "You don't. You just carry it like a curse with a compass." I stayed in town a few days after that. Couldn't bring myself to leave. Every time I passed the map on the wall, it was different. More roads, more dots, some with names, some still waiting. One morning, a college kid walked in with a backpack and a GoPro strapped to his chest. Sat down, across from me, and pointed at the wall. "Hey, what's that all about?" he asked, smiling. I didn't smile back. "Nothing," I said, but it was too late. His eyes had already found the map. They always do. A few weeks later, Darla told me he went missing, never made it to his hiking trip in Flagstaff. Last seen asking a gas station clerk for directions to a place that didn't exist. Greylight Spur, one of mine. So now I sit in this booth, sip my coffee, and watch. The map keeps growing. It always wants more. I haven't left yet. Maybe I'm scared. Or maybe I know I'm not done, because one day someone else is going to walk in and ask about the map, and I'll be the one with the story. I'll warn them. I'll beg them not to look too close. And just like me, they won't listen.